Hello and welcome to Dataforge. This is a new stream, and this stream is all about Keyforge and statistics of Keyforge. Yeah, so what is Dataforge and why am I doing this? Number one, I'm just a Keyforge fan. Love Keyforge. And it's very interesting thinking about Keyforge and all the aspects about Keyforge and what makes up your hand, how to play better. So, um, a lot of times I think about that kind of like, what is the optimal play? And sometimes I've put that to, hey, let's put it to the statistically speaking, what is the best play? And so for this first episode, we're actually going to go over an example from a long time ago. I think over a year ago that we were talking about actually on the Sanctimonious Discord. But we'll get to that. So Dataforge is going to be an exploration of the discovery of Keyforge in a new way, in the statistics of Keyforge. So I'm really excited, and I hope that we get your input as well, because I think this will be most successful if we get good feedback from you, our viewer, and um, ideas that people have for things to investigate. So that's what Dataforge is. Who am I? I am Zoc, and I'm no one special. In fact, probably many of our viewers are smarter than me, and probably many of our viewers will have better ways of approaching the problem. But I hope that you will all have some great ideas that we can explore, and I would love to be the conduit of that. So please feed me those ideas, feed me your feedback. I won't get everything right, but I like to learn. So I think together we can do great things. Um, so with that, let's talk about, hey, Dinobot, let's talk about our first episode, which is, hey, Zodid, which is the Wizard's Boot. And obviously, this here is the art from Mattermaker, which probably isn't a Wizard Boot, but here's what the idea was. We were on the Sanctimonious Discord over a year ago, and there was a discussion in the strategy channel of if you had one card in your deck that could win the game, what is the most optimal way to get to that one card? So let's talk about kind of this problem statement. I called it the Wizard's Boot, um, my script, and I forget it might have been Dave Cordero actually that coined that term. But kind of the theoretical problem is there's one card in the deck that wins you the game. We call that the Wizard's Boot. And the problem is, what does one play most efficiently to draw it? Does it make sense to mulligan or not if the card was not drawn in the first hand? And what is the probability the card will get drawn each turn for different starting hands? So that's a problem. And when I thought about that, I was like, you know, let's put it to the test. And for me, that was a Python script. And the way that I set about it was a Python script to simulate 1 million hands of Keyforge. And it would look at the starting hand. If each house had 2 cards each, that hand was mulliganed. All other hands were played. So if you had 3 of a house, 4 of a house, 5 of a house, 6 of a house, those were played. And this was I only tested for if you were the second player. So the Python script simulates running through the decks while trying to be most efficient by calling the house with the most number of cards in the hand. And if there's a tie, then the house with the most cards already played, therefore the most in the discard pile, and the least cards left in the house is played. If there's still a tie, it would pick a random house to play. So that's what I considered playing the most efficiently to get through your deck as fast as possible to get to this one card. The script would, of course, collect the data for how many turns it took for each scenario to draw into the wizard's boot. And all shuffles done with the Fisher-Yates algorithm, which is the same one that the Crucible uses. So that was kind of how I attacked this problem. And we can even take a look at kind of the output in Python, but yeah, let's kind of do that. Let's see. Okay. So here we go. We got the wizard's boot. It is this putty screen. Okay. Let's go up here. Pass the errors. This was one output. This one was actually when I ran it. Let's see. Let me see if I have. Okay, I need to. Python, yep. So this is an example of the output. However, this example, I actually ran it with having 2 boots in the deck. So these numbers are different. But it kind of gives you an output of how many hands were played for each starting condition. And what was the average number of turns to get to the boot for each starting condition. The average number of cards drawn for hands starting with each starting condition until they got to the boot. And then just kind of some raw data there. Kind of, if we go in and look at the code itself, I'm not a great coder, honestly. So I'm sure you have more efficient ways of doing things. But kind of what I did, we'll go down to kind of the start here. I set up an array, and this array had 36 cards. 1, 2, 3 is the different houses, so there's 12 cards of each house, of course. And then it was a 3-dimensional array, and the second bit of kind of each little array there was if it was a wizard's boot or not. So there's only one wizard's boot. It's in the first house, and then I had a whole bunch of kind of other ways to kind of store the data of when what churn was it drawn on for kind of each of the starting conditions. If you started with 3 cards in a house, 4 cards in a house, 5 cards in a house, 6 cards in a house, or if you started with a mulligan, which was 2 cards of each house. And kind of a bunch of other variables to kind of capture all the data. 1 million cycles. I clocked how long it took with my Raspberry Pi, and I actually forget which model it took. It takes about 20 minutes. It's a little bit quicker if you have 2 boots. Cuts it almost in half, not quite. And then I just do a big array. I have a bunch of functions to do different operations to see kind of what your starting hand, how many cards of one house in it, to see kind of where it goes down, and then my main kind of function is run through the deck, and it gives a couple parameters, the array of the deck itself, and then how many of one house is in the starting hand. And then finally, it checks the temperature while running. I want to make sure, because this was, potentially a little bit CPU intensive. I didn't want to burn out my CPU. It would get up to over 70 C, but not over 80, so that's fine. And then, as we kind of saw in the output, I print out a bunch of stuff. So that's kind of how I went about it. As I said before, I'm not the best programmer. I'm not the smartest guy. You guys probably have better ways of doing it, and I'd love to hear it. I'd also love to hear ideas for what to do next. But let's get into the results of this one. I've showed you data, but let's view it in a way to check it out or visualize it a little bit better. Yeah, that makes sense for Genka, Zodid. Like getting to the Martian generosity is very key for those. So it's at least interesting, even though this isn't a realistic way to play. This is you're always playing the most efficiently. You're trying to get through the deck as fast as possible. Whereas, um, if you do have that one card that wins you the game, you might want to do that. Usually, though, you have to, you know, try and respond to things that they're doing to make sure you stay in the game so that you can get to the powerful cards that you have in your deck. Usually they don't win you the game, but they're very important for your strategy, and so it's still somewhat useful. But let's get to the data. First, I broke it into all the different starting hands. So this is a starting hand of 3, and this is a distribution of kind of which turn the wizard's boot is drawn. And the reason I don't really have a y-axis here is because it was changing for every starting hand, because there's a lot more starting hands with 3 cards in a house than there are of 6 cards in a house. And we can actually look at that data too. I don't have a great way to show it, but it is interesting. And that makes sense, right? Having 6 cards in a house is not very common. So yeah, we can take a look at that data as well. But you can see here, it's actually a fairly even shot of drawing the wizard's boot for kind of the first 8 turns, and then it kind of drops off. So you're probably going to see it in your first 8 turns. You might not see it until your 11th turn. And this is still playing optimally. And obviously, this is also discounting if you have any logos or other house efficiency. This is just plain cards. Doesn't count if you have archiving, discarding, or anything like that. Going into a starting hand of 4 cards, we can see already right away we have a big jump. We have a much better shot comparing to 3 of hitting the wizard's boot early. And of course, that's just going to go up as you have more cards in your starting hand. But you can see here, almost, we're getting really close to getting it by turn 10, and there's just a sliver that also have it in turn 11. Whereas if you had three cards of a house in your deck, there was still a significant number at turn 11 for a starting hand of 3. So moving on to a starting hand of 5 cards of one house. Big jump up into that first hand. So much better shot of getting it. And that makes sense. The rest, it kind of jumps right back down to right around where the 4 in a hand was. But this one, it's gotten all of the wizard's boots by turn 11, which the others hadn't. Finally, moving on to a starting hand of 6. Now we almost all of them have got through by turn 10, and comparing that again to starting hand of 3, it's quite a big difference there. So, and that of course makes sense. You've already gotten through half of that house. That's a huge advantage. Finally, going to the 2-2-2 start. So the 2-2-2 start, you mulligan right away. I counted that 0th turn as a mulligan, so you have a percentage of getting it on that mulligan. So it's going to look a little bit different. On the mulligan, you already have a percentage to get it, but then it goes kind of quite down because you already saw 5 cards in that mulligan. Um, and those 5 cards is kind of random. It could be any of the distributions. So often it's 2-2-1. might be 3-2. So it's not necessarily guaranteed to be a great mulligan. But how does this kind of all come together? Because these by itself doesn't tell you much. Um, I did kind of, for both a mulligan and the 6 cards of one house in a hand, in the starting hand, put it into a cumulative probability, but then I also put them all together. This is what the mulligan looks like. So by turn 10, we have 99.6% chance of getting the Wizard's Boot. But you can see, because of that mulligan, we have a 14.2% chance of getting it that first turn. However, and this is pretty interesting, especially when we compare it to the 6 cards of one house, because obviously you have that jump at the beginning. So by turn 1, you're already at 21.7%. Whereas for the 6 cards in one hand, you actually have a 19.7% chance in that first hand, because you have 6 cards of one house in that hand, of getting it. And then already by turn 2, 31.6 and then 42.6. So it already by turn 2, the 6 card of one hand is better at getting to the Wizard's Boot than the mulligan, even though the mulligan starts out better. And so it takes 11 turns for all, 100% probability of getting to the Wizard's Boot with a mulligan. Whereas that happens by turn 10 for the 6 cards in the starting hand, and 99.8% by turn 9. So obviously it's significantly better. But let's compare them all together. This is the cumulative probability for kind of all the different starting hand conditions. 3 cards in a house, blue. 4 cards in a house is red. 5 cards in a house is yellow. 6 cards in a house is green. And then the mulligan, which is 2 cards of each house in the starting hand. So you mulligan that first hand. So again, we see it starting out with that mulligan already having a 14.2% chance. But then you can see it actually gets, by turn 2, the 6 card overtakes it. And then right around turn 4, it's just barely above the 5 card, but by turn 5, the 5 card overtakes it as well. And by the end, it's actually right there at the bottom with kind of the 3 card, which is quite interesting actually. This is also very interesting from the point of playing against one card like Jar or Quixel. Really makes you think about how really important hard R is. That's true, Zodid. That's a great point. If they're trying to get that one card, especially there's a lot of Quixel Stone decks that are so key to how that deck plays. This may help you get a good sense of the probability that they have it in hand or about to have it. So especially like say you get your artifact control turn 1, do you hold on to it? I mean, if you're playing against a Quixelstone and that's a win condition, you probably do, even though it's a chain. But yeah, it's definitely interesting to think about. So yeah, now obviously you don't get a starting hand of 6 cards in a house very often at all. It was a super small fraction of the 1 million runs. So obviously that one's much better, but some of the other ones are a little bit more interesting. The mulligan is still better than all of them up through turn 4. And you could also even think like, oh, hey, my opponent, for your guys' example, my opponent who's running a Quixelstone deck, ooh, they started with a 5-card churn. They're going to get to, statistically speaking, they're probably going to get to the Quixelstone quicker. And factor that in mind. Maybe you then have to take some suboptimal turns to be more efficient so that you can get to your hard artifact control. some of the things to think about. Obviously, Keyforge is so complex, you know. If they have a board of 5 cards out there, 5 creatures out there, maybe they don't need Quixelstone to win, so you still have to respond to that. So it's it's uh it's only one thing to keep in mind, of course. Now, this was pretty interesting, but it's kind of a unique scenario. There's not a lot of decks that really have just one card to win the game. Um, and so I did want to see, like, oh, what if you had 2 cards that were really important? You know, and I'm not sure what the example is. Maybe it's a double Martian Generosity Key Abduction. There's some of those out there. Um, what do those percentages look like? And obviously, it's very similar again. 6 cards of one hand just overtakes everything. And you can see, since there's 2 cards in the deck now, almost all the percentages are nearly doubled. They're not quite, but they jump up quite a bit. If they have 2 cards, though, for half of the scenarios, there's a 50% chance they have it by turn 2. So if you're really scared about um, Martian Generosity or something, and they have double in their deck, you got to be prepared to respond to it by turn 2. Or if they're at check for 6 for turn 2, maybe don't take them off. If you think they already have Martian Generosity, you know. So, oh yeah, 2 cards Brig. That's a really good point too, actually. Now this is not necessarily looking specifically for that scenario, because this is only saying if you have 2 cards in a deck, this gets you to one of them. However, I have seen some, double BR, double IG Brig decks, especially those sloppy little lab work people. They got a bunch of really crazy Brig decks. So it's not exactly looking for a 2 card combo. This is actually 2 duplicate cards of the same card. Yeah. But that's one of the things that I also thought, hey, does that make sense for a future episode? Do we want to look at 2 card combos? Or the one that I thought of because of Dinobot's great streams, he was doing the analysis in his stream of, okay, if I have a gigantic Ultra Graviton and I get one piece of it early on, what do I do? Do I discard it and wait for the other 2? Try and get them? Do I hold on to it and chain myself until I get one of the other 2? Or does it matter if the first card that I have is half of the giant or it's coming? And kind of what we were thinking was, if it's coming, it probably makes sense to hold on to that, because then you have 2 copies of whatever's left is in the deck, and you'll get to one of those statistically probably fairly quick. And because you have it's coming, then you can get the other half. Whereas if you have only, yeah, I mean, I guess it works either way. Though the one benefit of it's coming is if they kick it out of your hand. No, no, I think, yeah, I don't know. I actually don't know what the right strategy is there. If you get that card turn 1, do you hold on to it, or do you toss it and try and get the other 2 parts of it later? So that is just definitely something that I might want to explore. It's a little bit more complicated than this one. As I said before, I'm not a great programmer, but I think it won't be too bad. So that's an idea for a future stream. I think Brig or another 2 card combo is also a great idea. Um, Now, this is also, like I said before, this is assuming no efficiency cards. So I think it's good just from a kind of theoretical perspective. Um, but obviously, you want those decks with the efficiency to get there. Let's see. Let me take just Brig. What about you guys? What are kind of some other things like that where you had the question, what is the optimal play here, um, statistically speaking? That was kind of the one main example I had. Now, let's see. Zodis says, for its coming, you wouldn't want to play it. Only discard because you would chain yourself with half a gigantic. Yeah, definitely. If you played it or lose the opportunity, or yeah, you would chain yourself with half a gigantic if you played it, or lose the opportunity to play the gigantic. Right. That makes sense. Dinobot. Excuse me. Okay, Dinobot says maybe holding board wipes to get more value. We'd have to make some assumptions there, but that is an interesting one to uh, think about. Like, if we had some starting conditions of they have a certain number of creatures on the board, or they're generating a certain number of ember per turn um, by their board, kind of how how much ember do they gain? Now, I guess if you're holding a board wipe, it would be depending on how many creatures are in their deck of one house, how many turns would it take them to get to a certain board level that it would be worth holding it, right? Sometimes I wonder, is it worth destroying a creature? How likely is it they will go into that house to use that creature? Yeah, and some of that stuff, I'm not sure if you can determine statistically, because a lot of it depends on the cards on your house. Um, Sometimes, even with one card in a house, it might make sense to go back into that house, depending what else is in your house. You know, one good example is, hey, I have one Logos creature on the house. You just plop down a bunch of creatures. I have standardized testing in my hand and one creature in my house. I need to get rid of your board. I go back into Logos, reap or fight, and then I do standardized testing. So it's tough to put that to a um, you'd have to be smart, I think, with your starting conditions. Stats on holding cards, I think, would be interesting. When Keyforge first came out, it was always play as many cards as you can. Now I think you see more people chaining themselves to hold that TMTP. No, I agree. And this goes back to the classic bouncing death cork podcast, right? The kind of basics of Keyforge when you're the starting player is board plus hand. Whatever, you have most of creatures plus cards in your hand, play that. Um, and obviously that was like the starting point, and as you mature, then you think about those board clears, those scaling ember, and say, okay, it doesn't make sense for me to play it now, even though it's giving me an ember, because this will be much more important later. And it's definitely it's always, I think, for me at least, an evolving data point, especially because the sets change too, right? In Coda, you'd have a board clear and you'd say, who cares? I'm going to toss this because I'm not worried about their board and I want another card. But now in the era of big board, AOA, Worlds Collide, Mass Mutation, and DT, those board clears are so important. So yeah, maybe I could think of, like, what if we have a couple different starting points of creatures um, in a deck, and some of them, start with the average. Like, I think the average used to be around 17 creatures in the deck, and it's gone up over time. It's probably around 19 now. But say we have 19 creatures in the deck, and for that's like the low or the average case, and maybe we have two cases for that. One, and they're spread evenly, like 6, 6, 7. One starting case is one house has a lot more than the other, like 9 creatures in a house. And then on the higher end, we have a deck with like 23 creatures or something like that. One condition is they're spread evenly. One condition is one house has 10 or 11 creatures. Um, Using those starting conditions, then we can try and say, we're playing a deck that's got a board clear. You get that turn one. How many turns does it take for all those starting conditions to get to kind of a scary board for one of those houses? That might be a way to look at it. I don't know. Um, that's kind of one idea. I'm not sure. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay. No, that's awesome. Um, we could probably come up with a similar idea for scaling Ember. We could have come up with a couple different um, Ember per turn values for fast or slow decks. It gets a little bit complicated because we might have to say, oh, does our deck have a way to get them off a 6 Ember or something? And that one might get more complicated, but even the board clear idea would tell us something about like how important is it to hold it. It would be um, somewhat related to kind of also holding scaling Ember control. Yeah, no, this is interesting. Let me write that down. So let's see. Holding board clears. Other house has different starting scenarios of creatures per house. How many turns does it take for them to get kind of a big board? Yeah, so we'll have to kind of come at it from the opposite perspective. More or less is going to be like 4 different houses, 4 different decks with different amounts of creatures in a house. How long does it take for those houses to get a big board? But using that, I think we can kind of answer the question of does it make sense to hold the board clear for a certain amount of turns? Um, and then you can think for your deck, oh, if I have another board clear, it's going to take him this many turns to get a big board statistically. Yeah, it's okay if I discard it because I'll probably get the other one by the time they have a big board. Um, yeah, or something like that. Cool. So that's a good idea. 2 card combos like Brig is a great idea. And then it's more complicated, but the gigantic. Um, what to do if you get 1 card of the gigantic on your first hand, or the it's coming. Cool. Yeah. No, these would be some interesting ones to get through. I'll have to think about the scaling Ember one. There might be a more clever way to kind of approach that. Um, we 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 might even have to, similar to the board clear idea, come at it from a couple different scenarios because one, there's multiple types of scaling Ember, whether you have the effervescent principle or the TMTP, something that only affects over 6 or something that affects you no matter what. And then the other factor is, can you take them up just kind of off a 6 Ember? What is the right condition to hold that to so you can really make them pay? Dinobot says, have you heard of hypergeometric stuff? It's used in Magic the Gathering for land distributions. Not sure if it has any application to Keyforge. That's it. I have not heard of that. Actually, Keyforge is really my first dueling card game. I didn't play anything before it. I was a board gamer, but I've never played Magic. Maybe I played it like once on the application, on the iPhone application, because it was free. Um, but I haven't played any of those other ones. Keyforge, just my friend introduced it to me at the right time, and it was like, whoa, this is cool, and off I went. I'll have to look up that hypergeometric use in for land distributions. So land just gives you more or less a resource that cards use, right? Like, are they called spells? I don't know. So we could think like, is there another kind of resource, quote, resource in Keyforge? You're trying to play a land each turn. Okay. I'll have to look more up on it. I don't know anything about Magic the Gathering. So you want it distributed each turn is what you are saying. Interesting. Hey, I'm sorry, I don't know how to say your name. But thanks for the link. I'll take a look at that. Optimal time to play or use library access or library card. The optimal time, as everybody saw in the KFPL qualifier today, with Aurora winning it all with her deck, and I forget the name, Bozzy Professor something. It's got the master plan that she can put library access behind. So that's the optimal time, is when you can play it any turn you want because it's behind master plan. But oh, thanks, Dinobot. So let's see. I'll get to you. Is it Shaka? I'm Shaka. All right, perfect. I'll get to that in just a second. Let me think about the library access library card one. So this one is, you're trying to get to a certain number of one house in your hand. And obviously, you want those phase shifts, you want those wild wormholes, but I'll have to think about that. There could be optimal time to play it. You definitely have to make some assumptions of, oh, are there certain turns where I don't, even though I have 3 logos cards, I don't play because I'm trying to get to 5. So maybe you make the assumption like, oh, I'm not going to play this until I have 5 logos cards. Like, how long does it take to get to 5 logos cards or something like that? We'd have to set up the starting conditions or have a couple scenarios for that. Okay, Shaka says, let's say you are holding too much to protect. You can use the hypergeometric to estimate the next time you can call shadows, perhaps defined as 3 or more shadows in hand. Okay. I'll take a look at that. That's cool. See, you guys have the good ideas here. That's gonna be cool. as well as likelihood of drawing more of that house to play. Right, likelihood of drawing more logos. So that's almost like what is the grouping, which is similar to the hypogeometric. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because it's all around grouping of cards. Um, no, I really like that. That's that might even be similar to the library access one and kind of um, you know, having a starting point for running it is almost similar to, oh, should I play that hunting witch or Colonia, Shalonia, Chalonia, however you want to say it. Do I play that this turn with only one or two creatures, or do I wait a turn until I have three or four more creatures, or until I have the Witch of the Dawn where I can get back my Deepwater Gruin, or um, so there's a lot of similarities in kind of concept that problem I think is very Keyforge, or at least probably card games in general. But there's a lot of cards in Keyforge where you want a grouping of cards to come together at the same time. Excellent. Okay, so yeah, I think we got some good ideas. I might even put a poll together, um, maybe in the Discord of what do people want to see next. Um, I probably jam through kind of the details of this one pretty quick, and I probably could have spent a little bit more on each part of it. So I'm definitely would love to hear your feedback on kind of how I approached this problem and even just how I presented it. And then definitely, if you have ideas for kind of other problems in the future, we have a whole bunch of good ones already. Please let me know. And I think I at this point I'm even thinking I could do Chew in the next one. Like the two card combo would probably be fairly easy, and then I could also try and tackle like maybe the holding board clears or kind of one of the other ones. But maybe somebody else has maybe the poll says you want something else. So um, do you want a channel in the ABR Discord? Well, I'll think about that. That's that's a very generous offer. Thanks, Zodid. Um, yeah, let me think about that. That would be awesome. And I think, like, especially you guys know, there's a lot of kind of data geeks, way more than me, way smarter than me in Keyforge. Like, you got Sky Jedi, obviously. He's always got kind of all the statistics on different things that have happened, Mavericks or whatever. And there's a lot of people in the collector worm channel on the Sanctimonious. So yeah, maybe if we had like I think there would be a lot of interest in something like that. But let's talk offline. If like, what would that channel be about? I'm not sure if a channel for just my stream makes sense. But I don't know. Let's talk about it. And I really appreciate the offer. That's really generous. Um, and the math of Keyforge. Yeah, yeah. I think there'll be a lot of interest, at least from a pretty kind of vocal minority, I guess I would say. So I think it would be interesting. Yeah, thanks for watching, everyone. That's pretty much all I got. So I will put a poll, and we're gonna do it probably both in Sanctimonious Discord and the ABR Discord. Um, and we'll see what people are interested in for the next stream. I'll already start working on some just to see to make sure that we have one in the loop. And so we'll see if we get to the poll top one in the poll next stream or the stream after that. But I definitely want to do what people want to see. So thanks for watching. Hopefully this is a start of something really cool, and I'll also probably work later on having a more consistent schedule. For now, it'll probably be every week or two. I'm not going to have time to definitely dig in kind of every day on generating the data behind some of these problems, but at some point I'll want to get to a consistent schedule. Uh, and yeah, like I said before, please send me your feedback. Would love to hear it. And with that, have a good night. Have a great day. Take care. Keep forging.